Another episode of the Ultimate Intimacy Podcast with our favorite guest, Austin. Welcome back to the
Thank
podcast.
you. Love it. Love being here.
We love having you, obviously. It's a every week thing. So, and I know our audience is loving it too. We have a lot of people that write to us and say, "Hey, have Austin talk about this," or "We love this podcast you did with Austin." I love that we're focusing more on things that a therapist can talk about, because there's a lot of people out there that are really struggling and need the help to these things that we constantly get asked about. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so today's episode, what are we diving into?
I think one of the things we talked about was this concept of when I look at healing, right? That's the kind of paradigm I come from because people come in with all these different problems, and understanding the problem is not the solution, right? And so over the years, I've really tried to look at like how do we help people get this ultimate intimacy, this marriage that's available to them. And I think when people start to look at both their marriage and sexuality as part of spirituality, it's a paradigm shift that so many people disconnect spirituality from those two things, but also from the healing realm. And so when I'm working with a couple and they come in with, any number of problems, I'm trying to look at what's the best way I can help them. And, my clinical training was in Las Vegas. My early career was in Las Vegas. And we had the best of, let's call it the therapeutic understanding, even the neuroscience of like connection and sexuality. And I kept finding it was insufficient. I was like, this isn't enough. Like most of my couple, I mean, truthfully, the first 7 years of my work, every couple I met with, there was sexual betrayal. Every couple. That's why they were seeing me. That was my whole, world. And I've shared this before, I think in an episode, like when people are coming in the hardest spot, which sexual betrayal is the hardest. I mean, when you look at the research, the other thing that is the hardest for couples is the loss of a child. But that's not typically a between them thing. That's a really hard thing.
Yeah.
So working with a lot of couples where there'd been various levels of sexual betrayal and I mean Las Vegas level, right? We had a lot to figure out, and most people were disconnected from the concept of their own spirituality. Again, this is not religion. This is like, how do I connect to an aspect of me when my mind, my emotions, my body, everything is telling me to go, but another part of me is trying to work it out, right? And so we had to start to work with what is that part of you that wants to work this out? And typically it was this spiritual component going, I can do this. Like love is worth fighting for. This person is worth fighting for. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about how do we start to connect to ourselves spiritually and see our marriage and our sexuality in that light, because that's where healing comes the most. I mean, we can give you all the neuroscience and all the therapeutic techniques and all that, and we can make cognitive sense, but marriage and intimacy are not a cognitive thing. They're a spiritual thing. They're a soul level thing. So we need to start helping people connect in that way to do the repair and experience higher, let's call it higher intimacy. So
Yeah, we totally agree with that.
I
So,
was gonna just say, for those listening, like for certain times in my life, I've thought, okay, why is sex tied to spirituality? It's such a physical thing, right? Like it's, and I think a lot of women have a hard time, and men, some men too, have a really hard time connecting the two. Like sex is so physical. How is this spiritual? I think for me, what makes it spiritual is knowing that you have to be at such an emotional high connection in your marriage for both of you to want to be intimate. It's the most vulnerable, open, just like you have to have a pretty amazing place in your marriage for it to be a really deeply uniting sexual experience, right? And that's to me like where it becomes spiritual is because you've gotten to this place in your marriage where it's a beautiful thing. It's not like a all physical, it's not for one person, it's like uniting and awesome. And it's not always like that, but when you reach that point, you're like, our emotional connection is so good that we both want to be, not just have sex, but be intimate with each other. that's what to me makes it spiritual. Like God created marriage to be so beautiful that you want to express it with each other in your most nakedness, right? Your most naked. I mean, you talk about like emotional safety for women is like what works in the bedroom or gets them to the bedroom, right? That's a beautiful thing when you're feeling that safe, that loved, that connected. That's what
Right.
God wants for marriage. And that's why it's so beautiful and vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, I talk about this with clients often where I'm like, look, like having sex is among the easiest things in the world. A guy moves like, I don't know, a few inches. A woman can lie there. Not a complex thing, right? Teenagers do it all the time.
It's
Like
mentally complex.
sex is easy. Sexual intimacy is a whole nother ball game. Sexual intimacy doesn't even come because you love each other. Sexual intimacy doesn't come because you're married. It doesn't come because you had a child. Sexual intimacy doesn't come because you're having sex. We talked about this last episode. And so probably what we need to start to define is like what is sexual intimacy and why is it valuable? And then how do people get there, right?
Well, I would almost say sexual intimacy with the spiritual component is going to make your marriage better. It's going to grow you closer together. Sex without that component is probably going to cause damage and bring you further apart. So here you have an action, one with something and one without, that can completely cause your marriage to go a totally separate direction.
Right.
And I really believe that can happen, right? If you're just having sex, you're probably not going to make it, right?
Right.
But if you're having sexual intimacy and it's a spiritual aspect and bringing you closer together as a couple and bonding and uniting, there's nothing better than that.
Right. I think one of the challenges, like through my lens, I see like spiritual warfare on marriage, right? And um, doing the work that I've, had the opportunity to do, like I've had to like in session, like I don't know what to do, God. Like I this is hard stuff. I made a commitment that I would stay present, like I'd go into dark places with people. And so frequently the Lord is like giving me in the moment, like things I've never thought about. And very frequently I'm saying something that I'm going, oh, that's for me too. Like I need that, right? And just because of the nature of the type of work I did, I really felt like we were going to war with couples to fight back for their relationship. It had been taken through, sin or darkness or, affairs or all the things. And me and my team really had to like enter into prayer with the Lord. Like, how do we help people in such hard places? And it's just framed my whole view of like how do we help people heal. And the challenge is most couples, even though they're experiencing even spiritual intimacy and sexuality, they often aren't aware of that's what they're after. It truly is, even if you're not consciously aware of it, like your spirit is engaged in that process or it's disengaged in that process. But we're spiritual beings, whether we're, aware or not, like that's a part of our being. And so I really genuinely believe that there's a level of, let's call it ecstasy in marriage. It's not just in the sex component. Ideally, it's the sex is part of it. And you go, hey, marriage, like, yeah, it's got some work, but it's great. And it's great when we're at the kids' ball game. It's great when we're at church together. Like,
Yeah.
because we're one, this concept of becoming one. Going back a little bit to what we said before, how do I embody my, let's call it masculine spirit? How's a woman embody her feminine spirit? We both can operate from what they call masculine energy, feminine energy. Um, when I started to learn this concept, and I don't think it's defined fantastic anywhere, but when I started to study it, it really helped me start to realize like, there's an aspect of me that I can disconnect from that I don't bring to the relationship. And when that part of me is not present, my wife is not attracted to me. She's not wanting to be close. And same thing on the flip side. Like when I couldn't access like that femininity, that nurturing, that presence. And this is what I hear from couples all the time. Like whether we're talking emotions or sexuality, it's all about presence. Like
Mhm.
I want my spouse to be present, not going through the motions like we talked about. So for any couple, and again, like the audience could have any number of things. The place I would encourage is this reframe of sexuality in our relationship is meant to be a bonding of our souls, physical and spiritual. There's an emotional component. And when you start to make that reframe for those who want to be their best selves, there's value in understanding the next level of me and the next level of my spouse can have a deeper experience than the sex act, what two
Mhm.
teenagers can do really,
Right.
really easily, right? And so I'm sure you two have experienced what we call this transcendent kind of nature of sexuality, where it's above the orgasm, it's higher than the passion, it's higher than the intensity. It's experienced in the bedroom, but it's also carried out of the bedroom. And then right, it's kind of this reciprocal
Yeah.
thing, right? And so in the healthiest of relationships, it's not connect, disconnect, connect, disconnect. It's connect. Maybe you're not together, whatever. You're on a trip and Amy's home or whatever. You're not together, but you're still connected.
Yep.
That's where couples really are strengthened. And that's the safest like place for a couple in a marriage is when you have that, you're not at risk of your spouse, being tempted by someone else, they're not, checking out with the phone to like, because you have this thing, you can still get on the phone, you can, talk to the opposite sex and it's not a threat because what you have is so much more valuable that it's above what they could have with someone else
That's
sex.
so
Does that make
true.
sense?
Yeah,
And
no,
I
I
agree
love
with
that.
everything you said.
Oh, absolutely.
So you were hitting on like kind of the goalposts. I think that
Yeah,
kind of was
into that a little bit.
Do you?
Share your thoughts on
Well, I just had a comment like a couple days ago or last night, I can't remember. And the guy said, I was talking about how intimate and emotional sex is to men. We had done a survey of like 3,000 husbands, and the responses were just, and this post went viral because men were just like commenting, 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 but like, oh, it's intimate me. I just want to feel desired. It's emotional to me. I want her to want me. Like all those things that we've shared before. But he left a comment that said something like, it's like intimate time in marriage for so many husbands is like a moving goalpost. Like we have this list of things we have to accomplish before she ever is willing to get into the mood. And I was just thinking
it.
like,
We can never get there.
we
We
can
can never
never
seem
get
to
there
get there.
because it's always an excuse or it's used as a weapon or whatever. Like I think when we can tying into the spiritual side of this, I think and I've had to do this in my own life, in my own brain, when I have to think, okay, like I need to re-figure out what sex means to me. Like this is not just about him or physical needs or to get off or any of those, like sexual intimacy. And he does a great job at making the emotional connection strong. A great job. But when things are like, I have to just reprogram my mind sometimes to be like, okay, this was created by God. Like this is a spiritual thing when marriage is really great. This is supposed to be a gift. Okay, how do I reprogram my brain that it's not a chore? It's not just one-sided. Like it's just, I don't know. The goalpost can't be too high. Like this is supposed to be for us, not just for one person. And I think when we like for a lot of women, we have to do really big mind training, positivity training that sexual intimacy, I'm not talking sex, sexual
Right.
intimacy in marriage is for the marriage. It was designed by God. It's a beautiful thing. And if it's not in your relationship, what is causing it to not be? Right?
Yeah, it shouldn't be a checklist, or it shouldn't
Right.
be something to, and like, oh, if you do this, you'll get this. It shouldn't be a reward. It should be something for your marriage that happened.
Super guilty of being like having all those tabs open or the house is a disaster. I've got to do this, this, and this for the kids tomorrow. Or like I'm a multitasking mom, right? Like sometimes it does feel like it's just another thing I got to get done or I got to take care of him, whatever. And I have to remind myself, like, okay, this does not need to be done in order to have a great sexual intimacy. If we're more intimate and we have that strength in our marriage, then after or before, whatever, be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now. I'm a stress mess. This needs to be done. I'm like, can you just help me with these things or help me to figure out this? And when I know he's like my best friend, he's like, hey, let's talk about it. We can push it off to tomorrow if it needs, or I'm willing to help. Changes everything, right?
Yeah, one of the things you're talking about, and this is where I think like part of what I've been conceptualizing for quite a while, and I feel like this is an accurate discovery, is I believe there's a higher type of marriage that most people don't experience, to be honest. I think it takes what you were talking about, work and effort and prioritizing the relationship. But I think the benefit of it, like to have a secure relationship that you love, like look around how many people don't have that. That lets us know that it's one of the rarest things. Rare things are the most valuable,
Yeah.
right? So if you look around and you go, okay, less people have a great marriage than have really nice homes and all the, stuff. A marriage that you both really love with great intimacy across the board, it's probably the rarest thing you'll find on earth, right? I believe it's available to everyone. I think it requires a lot of selflessness, a lot of sacrifice. I don't think it's something we're trained in. If I'm really honest, I believe it requires revelation, consistent revelation, a man going to God and saying, hey, I need more of myself. I need more. Help me know how to be there for her. A woman doing the same, right? Going to God. Then you come together. I think God teaches us how to create the best marriages. A lot of people aren't going to God for their marriage or their sexuality.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing that something so important and sacred, we don't feel we can go to God and pray about our sexuality. Remember early in our marriage, someone said, pray about your sexuality. I was like, I had been trained to think that sex was a certain
Just
thing
have
and my wife
sex. Yeah.
too, right? Right.
Right.
And so, I think this goalpost concept, I remember having a professor, and we call this a quid pro quo marriage, right? It's a trade. And I had this professor who was really blunt about it. He's like, when you look at a quid pro quo where it's trading, right? You're kind of earning. He said, that's just prostitution in marriage. And I was like, ooh, right? And he said, think about it. You're trading something for sex. It's a bartering system. You do XYZ, I'll show up sexually. And one of the things he said is he's like, we should be teaching people not to accept themselves as a prostitute in marriage or a trade. We should be teaching them that there's something better, that it's not a earned thing, it's not a good enough thing. There's conditions for intimacy, and some of those are, I need, like you described, I need some help, like, but it's not a trade thing, it's a
Yeah.
team effort thing,
Right.
right?
Right.
I remember entering this as a therapist. I remember being invited into this, it's like a Facebook group on like Christian sexuality, something like that. And I remember there was like this thread, right? And a guy was like, it was something like, I'm gonna ask my wife if she'll flash me her boobs if I initiate family prayer time. I was like, okay. And these other guys were like, oh, I'm gonna do it too. And
Romantic.
I was
So romantic.
Yeesh.
like we're off here, right?
Yeah, we're a little
We're
off.
off here. Um, Obviously, men love the female body. It's beautiful. It does something to us when we see it. It does something to us when we're naked with a woman. When right, she's affectionate. Like it does something to men that I don't think we necessarily do the same for women. Like I mean, I've talked with hundreds of couples around sexuality.
How
So
is it not like this? I mean, look at this.
I mean, we're good looking, but we don't. It's just not the same, right? um, so I think when each other understand that, like ideally, we wake something up in the other. Amy, for you, like I know when you guys are in a place where you're disconnected, um, when he takes an effort to show you that he cares about reconnection, I imagine nothing's more romantic, more right, like, oh, he's kind of mad at me and I'm still worth the effort, right? Same thing on the flip side. Like you mentioned this in a conversation we had before, like when you take that proactive step to like, hey, I'm going to initiate intimacy before you ask or whatever, that proactive, and we call it engaged in your well-being, that is where the deepest bond is built in a couple. Um, and I talked to a lot of couples about this. There's three core attachment needs, and I'll tie these in spiritually. First attachment need is, are you available? Like, are you there? Right. The second one is, are you responsive to my needs? So it's like, okay, you're over there. When I come to you and ask for something, you'll respond. A lot of people don't get that from their spouse,
Yeah.
especially around intimacy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to be close to you. I want to make love to you. I want to have sex with you. No, 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 not right now. Okay, so an attachment need that becomes an attachment wound. Then the third one is engage in my well-being. So the first two are kind of like you're over there. If I come to you, you respond. The third one, which is the most valuable, is I'm here and you're checking on me, thinking how you can love me. That's where people feel the most loved, the most
Yeah.
secure, the most safe. And when that's in place, the other two are obviously naturally in place because you're proactively available and responsive before they ask.
Yeah.
And the reason I think this like attachment component is spiritual is when we're living from our best selves, we are selfless, we are thoughtful. We when we're kind of consumed with ourselves and we're more focused on our emotions, our appetites, our distractions, that's
Mhm.
very self-focused, right? And so the healthiest marriages are a give. It's I'm here to love you. I'm here to create something with you. I don't love when we say I'm here to provide myself to you. I think it's a co-creation.
I agree.
We're here to create something. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. We read a statistic that like couples who pray together daily have like a 2% divorce rate. And I think that goes hand in hand with the spiritual component that you're talking about with sexual intimacy, right? You become less selfish. It becomes more about you together versus individually when you're thinking more selfishly, how do I fulfill my needs versus how do we create something together? And
Right.
Right.
Right. So this, go ahead, Amy.
I was just gonna say, this I don't want to change the topic, but like for women, like I don't know if you're on social media, like there's been some super viral posts, like you know how there's kind of these trends, but a lot of women like doing posts on our main love language or the number six love language should be not having to ask, right? And I think that the reason that that's such a big thing right now, and I understand it being a wife, is that it's because we want our husband to know us, to like to feel known, right? To feel like he doesn't have to ask what I need because he really knows what I need and he just kind of does it. I'm not talking like household stuff or doing the dishes. Like, what do you really need? And I feel like that's such a spiritual thing too. When you really get to know your spouse on a spiritual level, you kind of already know what they need from you and you kind of just speak that. And I was going to say it just goes both ways too because a lot of husbands are like I want you to initiate. I want you to prioritize that. Let like we kind of know that. Are we willing to speak that even though it's not something like I always use the analogy like stopping in the store and buying your wife flowers or something. It takes $5 in 5 minutes, right? A husband doesn't like think of that very often. That's not something that's naturally on his mind, but if he does it, it means a lot to some women or maybe something else. Same goes the other way. We're not naturally thinking about it, but when we can put in the effort because we know they want that and we know them, so we're
Mhm.
willing to put in the effort. I just think that those kind of things in marriage are what take our relationships to another level so that sex is intimate. Like
well, in the scriptures, when it says, and they knew each other, what does that mean?
exactly what I
Right.
was saying, right? There's different levels of knowing each other.
Right.
So,
But it's interesting because that whole concept of knowing it's not a cognitive thing, it's an experiential thing.
mhm,
It's what you're describing is born out of paying attention
pay attention,
for
be
several
present.
years, being
Mhm.
curious, right? And then going, oh, turns out my spouse doesn't like what, or they really like this. And it's a proactive thought process of my spouse matters. I love them. And what can I do to show that? And I think it's interesting as a therapist, very frequently I ask people, what do you need? And I tend to come from a place with my clients to say, in my opinion, let's build something higher than a need-based marriage. Let's build a want-based marriage. What do you guys
Hmm.
want?
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, like, let's figure that thing out.
Mhm.
But when I ask people what do they need, most people don't know. They often will share what they know they don't want. I
Mhm.
know I don't want that. I need the opposite of that. But when I say, what do you really want? People go, they'll tell me, and then I'll suggest a little bit higher, and most people go, I didn't know that was an available thing. right? And so the place I'm trying to go here is when we look at needs and wants in a marriage, your spouse isn't always even the most reliable source. I do believe God knows best. And so if a husband and a wife are both going to God, we talked about this in an episode before, but if they're both going to God and looking at their marriage and their relationship as like a stewardship, right? When the scriptures talk about God brought you together, right? We fall in love. That is not a very conscious choice, to be honest with you. That is, I mean, we can go into that another
Trip
day, but
over
that is,
it and you bump into each other and all.
yeah. So if you believe God brought us together, probably to both test us and try us and to help us become our better selves, right? Then God gave me a stewardship of this person that I'm in a covenant relationship with. I need to ask God how to do this well. And if your value, this is what I talk with couples oftentimes, is do you have a value to be a good spouse? That's different than my value is to have a good marriage. Do you have a personal value to be a good spouse? Yes. Okay. Then ask God how to be a good spouse to them. God will give liberally, right? Um, and a lot of people do have that, like that personal value. The challenge they tend to feel is, I don't know that my spouse has that anymore, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we get into a conversation of, right? And again, like I'm a therapist. People come and ask me my thoughts and opinions, and when I'm doing my job well, I often say, God knows you better than I do. Like I can give you some good stuff. Well, let's include God in this journey, and what do you feel you're getting from God? And then I can help them, apply that and come up with, structure and whatever. But if we're, having this conversation about marriage and sexuality being part of spirituality, I think there's two pieces here. One is that can be a God component, like my relationship with God, but also times it's like getting in tune with our higher self, like our own, spiritual being. And one of the ways that's helpful to do this is, when I ask people, like, what are you feeling emotionally? They can tell me. And I'll say, okay, what if your emotions are gone? And I say, and what if your like, your beliefs or your thoughts are gone? What if your body's gone? Like, what's left? And they'll go, oh, like we call that spirit or energy or love, right? What are those core desires when fear's not in place, when, shame's not in place, when lust's not in place, right? That's where people find love typically.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is the nature of I would say our spirit is love and light. And that's where we can nurture a relationship that's, dead. Like I heard this thing yesterday where the video I was watching said, the concept of resurrection, Christ can resurrect a dead person. He can resurrect a dead marriage.
Yeah.
And so if we're accessing Christ, if we're accessing love, God is love, if we're accessing light, and we bring that into the relationship, it can wake up things that are, long, long dormant, including sexual intimacy, including passion, including
Yeah.
service.
We 100% believe that as well. So for the couples out there listening, they're saying, I wanna have that level of intimacy. I want to have that spiritual component. I don't know how to. What are some simple things that you could recommend that they do? And then Amy and I can share if you don't, what we've done if you don't
Yeah,
cover them.
why don't we actually start there? Why don't you two start with what you've done, and then I'll share some other additional ones. Because my assumption is you've done a lot of the really good ones. So
I'm just
why
going to
don't
name
you
one.
start?
I'm just going to name one that goes hand in hand with this. I take my marriage covenant very seriously. And that just doesn't mean that I'm loyal. That means that I'm loyal like with my time. That means I'm loyal with the way that we have conflict resolution. That means that I'm loyal with the intimacy in our marriage. That means that I choose to prioritize our marriage first because that's what we covenanted to. Like that is literally what keeps marriage passionate. I'm not saying it's always been perfect. I'm not saying we don't have ups and downs or whatever. But like if you really are committed to your marriage and committed like to the covenant and promises that you made when you got married. If you look back at wherever you want to word it, promises, your vows, whatever you said, if you look back at those and things that you covenanted or promised to your spouse, I think a lot of people, if they were honest, would be like, nope, I'm not keeping them. We're picking our phones over our marriages, or we're picking our kids over our marriages. like if you pick your marriage first and that is your top priority, we did that podcast on it can only be one priority. You're gonna have a great marriage because you're gonna learn how to communicate. You're gonna learn how to conflict resolution. You're gonna learn how to prioritize your spouse over your phone. Like if you really choose to take the covenant of marriage seriously, it takes it to another level, and you absolutely are bringing God into the. I think that's changed. I just feel like 24 years in and we're doing really well because I take it really serious. Like I want to have a great retirement. I want to still have a passionate marriage by then. I want our kids to say the best gift you gave us was to put your marriage first.
Yeah.
Thank you, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome.
I think you hit it right on. The only thing I would add to that, and I would say we're not always the greatest at this, but we do try, and that's through prayer. Whether it's together as a couple or individually, praying for each other, praying for guidance on how to deal with certain things together. I think that's so valuable as well too.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier today. This word in our spiritual arena is in the Bible, cleave, right?
Right.
And um,
What we're saying,
Yeah.
yeah,
well, that's what you're describing is, and you're cleaving to the other, you're cleaving to the marriage. Like I genuinely believe so much is trying to pull our attention away from the things
constantly.
that matter
Yeah,
most, right? I hear this when I meet with kids. Like my mom and dad are so distracted, they're so unavailable. So much of our attention is going to dopamine seeking behaviors, right? We all know though that well, maybe we don't all know. I will say that oxytocin is the more fulfilling chemical. That's love. That's connection. That's what comes in sexuality. I remember reading this book. It was around the neuroscience, and it said when you make love, when you're being intimate with another person, during orgasm, oxytocin will dump. However, if you're having an orgasm through like masturbation, oxytocin doesn't dump. It is this bonding chemical.
Hmm.
And the world is pretty addicted to dopamine when there's something far more, fulfilling available. And it's not, obviously, oxytocin isn't all through sex, it's through connection.
Right.
yeah,
And our world is becoming very disconnected. And so that word cleave, like what you said, that is the covenant, is I will put my spouse in our marriage, all aspects of it above everything else. And I'll put my time and energy into that. And a lot of people don't take that seriously. I remember reading a talk years ago and it said like you put everything above put your spouse above everything. And when you put anything above your spouse, nothing tends to work, which is what
so
is
true.
what we see.
Hmm.
And so this concept, even if you got married not aware that you had a covenant, like marriage inherently is a covenant. That's what marriage is.
Yeah.
This idea of return to the covenant. So there was a point where you would do anything for this person. Why not now, right? Why not invest in, you read the book or you go to therapy or you just be kind to each other or you just show up, right? And over the past several years, I've gotten maybe less patient with people that won't invest in each other. I'm like, look, hey, if you're not going to invest in each other, like, how can I, right?
What
Like,
am
Yeah,
I doing for you? Yeah.
I look for people that want to do it, and I remember working with a couple, and this was really a valuable thing for me. I remember a really challenging situation, and I told the couple, I said, look, you two can do this, and I don't think you even necessarily need my help, but it will take sacrifice. It will take very high level focus. And it was so sad to me, but I remember the wife, she looked at him and she said, if I asked you to sell your dirt bikes so you had more time with me and the kids, would you do it? And he looked at me, he's like, no. I was like I felt like my heart was ripped out, right? I was like,
Yeah.
he's prioritizing something ahead of a woman, a
yeah,
spouse.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we can do this all the time. But what you two are doing is you're prioritizing, right? Like you said. And so, making the covenant the priority, including prayer. And then I would say a couple things that I've found really valuable is there was a long period of time where I felt like let's call it kind of split. Like there's this version of Austin, there's this version of Austin, right? And um, this version of Austin was like, let's call it lustful. He was selfish. This person was giving and selfless. And I was in this kind of war. And one of the things that really helped me, honestly, was to start to sit in quiet and just try to listen. And it started as prayer, but it became more of what I'll call a communion. I stopped speaking so much to God, and I started saying, I need to hear something I don't have. I need to know something. And what I've experienced and what I've seen with other people is when we do that, God shows up and he will take us on a journey of growth and discovery. And I think the hardest journey for most people is to look at themselves and to see that they're not who they could be yet, but then be okay with that and go, of course not. I'm only 25 or I'm only 49 or whatever, right? And giving each other that grace, because I think marriage continues to ebb and flow. I don't think you just hit it and you're like, oh, we got it.
Oh,
Right.
exactly.
I see
Different.
couples,
Yeah.
yeah, different seasons, right? I'm always impressed when a couple that's much older than me, I mean, in their 70s will come in and they're like, hey, like we hit some struggles or we're hitting something that we've never faced before. And oftentimes, it's not that I have experience in that realm.
Right.
Oftentimes, what I can do is I can just guide the conversation where they can, not have the emotions in the way or whatever. But I think if we accept that marriage done right will continually require another level, another level, and
Mhm.
it's not always going to be equal, right? But
Right.
when people embrace that, then you feel like, hey, we're in this together. We're not
Yeah.
against each other. Does that make sense?
No, totally.
Yeah, love that. And I agree
Yeah.
with every single thing you
So,
said. I mean, it makes
yeah,
exactly
it's
what
all
we,
about commitment and just, I mean, and like you said, the levels, like sometimes it goes back down and you got to work back up,
yeah.
constant effort. So,
Yeah. I think there's this concept of like hungering and thirsting after righteousness.
mhm.
If we see love and intimacy as righteous, how do we start to hunger and thirst for that in our marriage, right? We call that concept desire. I remember reading a book early in my career called Rekindling Desire. It's written by some of the most renowned sex therapists.
Mhm.
You don't have to go read it necessarily, but one of the things they talked a lot about is it can be rekindled, right? You can
Yeah.
rekindle desire. And when you rekindle desire, you have the energy for all sorts of things as a couple, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Because
really do.
energy is the thing that a lot of couples struggle with, is like we've talked about, that how do I invest? I'm tired or I'm right,
Mhm.
all that stuff. And so my hope with, this episode is couples start to think about marriage a little bit differently. They start to think, even if they didn't, knowingly know they were entering into a covenant, it's a covenant. I mean, it's valuable to research marriage, right?
Yeah.
And then also a commitment back to yourself. Like, I want to be the best version of me, and knowing like if I bring that, that's going to affect my spouse in a positive way, and they're likely to rise up and reciprocate.
Yeah.
And that's what we see. Like, I have a lot of people come in, I never meet their spouse. Like, their spouse isn't interested in therapy, and I go, that's all good. Our goal isn't to get them engaged in therapy, it's to get them engaged in marriage. We can help you engage in marriage in a way that invites them into
Yep.
it, and
So
that's a
true.
valuable thing. So
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, we hope all of you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get in touch with Austin, just reach out to us at amy@ultimateintimacy.com. He's there to help with any of the things that you need. You can see why we have him on often. He's incredible, and just we love working with you, Austin. So again, if you have any questions or want to contact Austin, just reach out to us. We'll put him in touch. We'll put you in touch with him. And I think Austin's offering a few minutes of time to kind of get to know you and see what your situation is and see how he can best help. So just reach out to us again at amy@ultimateintimacy.com. Appreciate you being on with us, Austin.
thank
And
you for the best. Thank you.
yeah. And until next time, to all of you out there listening, we hope all of you find ultimate intimacy in your relationship.